Hi, everyone. I wanted to provide a quick intro to a recording of a presentation that Perry Wooden and I gave in front of the Diffuse Tap community. The presentation involved whether crypto can go mainstream without robust back office tools. And we attended Diffuse Tap a couple weeks ago and talked about some of the back office tools that crypto lacks in comparison to TradFi and how those tools will be necessary for crypto and DeFi to really go mainstream and intersect further with TradFi. Again, the recording follows right after this, and it was in front of Diffuse Tap. We provided links to the Diffuse Tap community, and I would invite people to also check out Diffuse Tap in general for some of their educational content on crypto, digital assets, blockchain, and various other alternative investments. Thanks, everyone.
Ahoy, you're listening to Diffuse Tap with Kenny Estes and Isla Krem. Today we are joined by Norman Hanawha and Perry Wooden of Node 40. We're going to be talking about what back office tools traditional finance has, but crypto doesn't, how having underdeveloped tool infrastructure can stifle innovation in crypto, and what innovative solutions are available in this space. Enjoy. And welcome back, all. Hope you had good conversations. If this is your first time here, you might be a little confused. So here's what's on tap. This is a weekly event. We've done it. This is number 219 in a row. We're going to briefly talk about Diffuse Tap, the event you're in right now, and then Diffuse Funds, the company putting it on. And then we're going to do a little fireside chat with Norman and Perry, talking about back office tooling in crypto. And then we're going to do two more rounds of the tap room you just experienced, where it's your opportunity to network with each other. The audience is pretty much all alternative investors with a heavy skew towards digital assets. So we spend a lot of our time here each week with you in groups of 4, 5, or 6, just to get to know each other and learn what y'all are up to. But we do want you to learn a little bit, which is why we have a different speaker pretty much every week, except for last week, but every other week. Diffuse Funds is the company putting this on. We do a few things, but the big focus right now is our Diffuse Digital 30 product, which is a market cap weighted index fund of the top 30 crypto assets. It's trying to be the S&P for crypto, and it is publicly listed. So do let us know if you want to learn more about that. But that's enough about us. Over to our speakers, Norm and Perry. Maybe, Norm, do you want to start it off? Maybe unmute. Well,
No,
thank you both for coming, and give a little bit of your background and what you're up to over at Node 40.
Perry's you. I'll let him start off here if you want to give the background, and then I can jump in.
Yeah. I'll give a little bit of background, kind of going back to the founding and my meeting of my co-founder, both engineers who met each other back in 2012, got into blockchain early. 2015, we started a staking company in the space. So customers were getting yield. At the end of 2015, our customers were asking us for financial reports so that they could understand what that yield is, because brand new asset has a different basis every time you get it. It's complicated. So we built a financial engine to produce reports and fell in love with that. So today, what we really focus on is aggregating lots of digital asset data and then producing the reports that businesses need to understand what their position is, any strategy they can take, any liabilities they may have. And that's really where Norm's level of expertise comes in. So while we're a really technically heavy company, Norm can have that conversation around what does it mean for a company and what are their needs in the space.
Yeah, hey everyone. I've been in Diffuse Tap for a while now. Got to know Kenny and Isla. Norman, now I've been with Node 40 for about a year and a half. My background is in tax and accounting. I was a tax partner at EY in their financial services group for about 10 years, doing large transactions for insurance companies and hedge funds, PE funds, etc. And then I got into blockchain, specifically blockchain tax and accounting, and met Node 40 about a year and a half ago and fell in love with the company, love the product, see so many use cases for it. It particularly not just for tax, but accounting, audit, financial planning, tax planning, etc.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're clearly sitting at the intersection of kind of like traditional finance, institutional reporting, and things like that, and crypto. So I mean, the topic is crypto tooling. So what what are the things that are kind of lacking today in the crypto environment from what you'd expect from for a more financial institution?
Norma, I'll take that. Well, what was lacking up until July 9th of this year was final regs. So Treasury released final regs on how people need to be treating these digital assets that they have on their balance sheet. And high level, what it really comes down to is lot relief. How are you going to dispose of these assets or move them around? And then the other is cost basis. So how are you going to calculate that? So Treasury came out with what these regs are, and we now have a go forward where everybody who is playing in this space needs to have their books and accounting in order by January 1st of 2025. So just a few months down the road. So that's what was missing. Norm, I'm happy to turn it over to you to talk about really kind of the specific needs that companies had and why it was difficult for them to meet those sort of financial reporting needs.
Yeah, I'll just start with a couple of verticals. As far as tax goes, um, there's whether it's hedge funds, traders, or exchanges that are engaging massive volumes of transactions, we're having difficult keeping track of all the data and actually processing it, and getting to know exactly what their financial where they financially stood, preparing financial statements, tax reports, etc. So that was one big hurdle. I'd say for a while there, going to Perry's point, for a while there, people were kind of doing whatever they wanted to do, especially in the tax space. Those days are coming to an end, at least in the US and Europe. And a lot more, whether it's US, CARF OECD, IFRS, GAAP, all those rules are starting to be implemented to provide more detail for what exactly you have to do as a crypto investor, trader, exchange, custodian, whatever it might be. And you're going to need tools effectively to be able to
Mm.
process that type of data, make the decisions you need to make, etc. Outside of those areas, I talked a little bit earlier about audit. We have, people need to be able to audit exactly what has been going on. Kenny knows about this a little bit with hedge funds, investment funds. They have investors. They need to be audited. That's just one type of audit. Audit of public companies, etc. So that's another area in addition to the accounting and just preparing the financial statements.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, you both touched on the July 9th kind of clarity that we finally have around these rules. Can you give it like a high level, just some of the key takeaways from that, like things that maybe the audience might not be aware of, or some of the high level clarifications that were made?
Yeah. So high level is Norm made reference to it no longer being the Wild West. So people used to form transactions. So that means they were sending value somewhere else. And then after the fact, they would try to reconcile that. What the regs say now is that prior to forming a transaction, so prior to sending a digital asset somewhere that could have a capital impact, you need to have either a standing order as to what tax lots you're going to dispose of, what that lot relief methodology is, or
Sorry,
you
what's
need
a tax lot?
a tax lot. So as you are as you are acquiring assets, each asset has its own cost basis at the time that you acquired it, right? So think about the way property works, and that's those are the rules that are applied to digital assets. When you acquire something, it could be worth $1 one day and it could be worth $2 the next day. You have to track all of those so that when you move it, you can calculate the difference between what the cost basis was for that tax lot versus what the value of it is at the time of the disposition. And then the difference is your liability.
And so is this like FIFO, LIFO type stuff? Basically,
Yeah,
figuring out.
right. So there's a couple of ways you can handle this. There's FIFO, which is the default that Treasury says you can use, or there's Spec ID, which is really what's preferred. Now, spec ID is specifically identifying the tax lots that you want to dispose of or move. And in Bitcoin, it's really easy because they have something called UTXOs. So every single unspent transaction output, that can be its own tax lot. And you can individually pick these when you form a transaction. When you get into other currencies that are like account based, so Ethereum, you have to select a methodology ahead of time. So that might be the default would be FIFO, but people are making the case that you could have a standing order for HIFO, high in, first out. And so then you would draw down on the highest value asset, and that's what you're going to dispose of first. But again, those have to be defined. That has to be a standing order prior to the transaction taking place.
Okay, and obviously the advantage of HIFO, which I've never heard before, that's great, is so high in first out, so it's the highest price. So the idea is when you sell it, assuming you're in the money, as it were, that will minimize your capital gains. That's why you'd want to do that, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Question from Ray. Actually, two good questions, but this sounds really complicated. So does this ruling make it harder for just the average consumer to just use these currencies as currencies? Everyday purchases?
Yeah. So yes, it's very complicated because it's a disruptive technology. It's brand new. So wrapping your head around what this thing is the important point. And I think a lot of people got in, they saw the potential to make money, so they just went for it. But now we really need to take a look at what is the strategy for interacting with these digital assets. And in order to have a strategy, you need to be well informed, which means you have to capture the data that's available to all of us on chain, track that so you can make a determination about how you're going to move and interact with these different assets. So while it is very complicated, it's all potentially programmatic. And I've got my co-founder Sean Ryan in here as well. But like he has spent a lot of time understanding what this stuff is, what this new technology is. And the fact that it's all programmatic means that you can develop tools like a Node 40 to help bring efficiencies to the way you are interacting with digital assets.
And
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, Norm, please.
I would just add, Kenny, like as a one additional example, and you could take this one example and multiply by 50 more. I'm just thinking one off the top of my head. So now you're on Coinbase, you bought ETH, you transferred it to participate in some sort of a transaction on chain, let's say a DeFi, lending, borrowing, whatever it happens to be. The exchange now under these rules will report to the IRS. They are now required to report. They report potentially that you had a gain or loss on that in a 1099. So IRS now will have reports saying gain, loss, potentially. You prove that that's wrong. You, the taxpayer, have to prove that that's incorrect. So that's just one of many. I can go the other way around. You brought something into Coinbase, same exact scenario. Coinbase says, hey, we don't know where it came from. We're just going to report the IRS you have this. You have to, you, the taxpayer, have to prepare the reports and even maybe even inform Coinbase about where you got that asset, how much you bought it for, all that kind of stuff. So it's the there's going to be a lot more information provided to the government, so to speak. And you as the taxpayer or whatever party are going to be able to be in the position to have to defend your own position, your positions going forward.
Gotcha. I'm sure that all the crypto purists are going to love that or are loving that. This sounds not too dissimilar, honestly, from 1099s and how they've kind of always worked, right? Where you have the exchanges that are actually reporting your trades, and then if you can file differently, that's fine, but you just need to be able to support why you're not going with those numbers.
Yeah, the difference, Kenny, is that with traditional 1099s, there is a clearinghouse where you can say, what is the value of this asset? In digital assets, the only one who knows the value of the asset is the one who owns the asset. That's the custodian. So the burden currently falls on the individuals who are interacting. I think that will change over time, but for the next foreseeable future, that is going to be a burden where individuals will need tools to help them figure that out.
Okay, so basically this feels like, back to Ray's point, if I wanted to go buy a can of Coke, that's stupid complex versus just using money, right? Like given this rule set.
One thing going to raise point, the IRS doesn't want to be flood. They recognize some of that. There are some de minimis exceptions for things like stable coins and stuff like that. If you bought Coke, I don't want to get, we can have a whole, Perry and I are having a whole hour and a half session on this, but there's a lot of that kind of stuff. The rules get pretty complex. There are 300 pages worth of rules on and that's just a starting point. They're coming out with more rules over the next X number of years, along with the OECD issuing rules. So Ray, there's some potential opportunities to get out of some of this, but very small amounts.
Okay. So this is generally part of a larger trend towards institutionalization of digital assets, right? And rules and regulations is just part of that, which obviously helps the incumbents more than anybody else. So how do you see, there's a lot of crypto companies, crypto products, crypto offerings out there. How do you see the interplay between this new financial services system, if you want to call it that, and traditional ones? Like how do you see that ending? How do you see them combining, or are they always just going to be two separate paths?
Well, traditional finance is going to eat it up. And I think that's probably the unpopular opinion, especially for the crypto crowd. Prior to regulation, anybody could do anything and they could just say, listen, there's nothing that says I can't do this. Now that there are finalized regs, you're going to see the traditional finance organizations, institutions, and businesses say, I think we can leverage this to gain efficiencies, cut down on costs, and still offer investment vehicles that, you know, can live natively on the chain, and kind of open that up to a much broader audience than they ever could before. They'll model a lot of that off of the work that was done by some of these cowboys, and then even some of the folks that really were thinking, I want to survive for the next couple of decades, and they did do this right, but they're not traditional finance. Traditional finance will either buy that up or just copy it.
Interesting. My background is high frequency trading, and the way that went down is the institutions just kind of generally suck at innovating. I don't think that's a controversial statement. And they did just buy the solutions and then bolt them into their core systems. But it sounds like you're more advocating or thinking that they're just going to do it in-house versus doing an acquisition roll-up type strategy.
So the beauty of some of these smart contracts that have already been developed in the smart contract, think of that as the rule set for the financial vehicle that lives on the blockchain, the decentralized blockchain. Think about a Fidelity, for example. They wouldn't have to necessarily buy it. That's all there. They can just copy it. They can copy that same protocol and then tweak it as needed. So sure, maybe they want to buy the customer base that has already interacted with one of these large, well-known protocols that is doing it right. But if they see something that's interesting, there's nothing that says you couldn't just copy the code base and deploy your own contract with whatever requirements you have for your institution.
Interesting. So then that's effectively an IP issue, right? Because they can just fork it and go with it. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. But then that has a question around like these crypto enterprises, whatever they're structured, like what is the intrinsic value in them if it is just the code base can be forked willy-nilly?
Right. So intrinsic value is probably going to be the customer base. So think about some of the larger players like a Uniswap who are saying, okay, we already have a large customer base. Granted, some of those, we don't know who those customers are, but if we KYC them, if we know who that customer is, now they can become really valuable because they've gone through the hoop of making sure that they can interact with the financial vehicles that we've developed, but also just knowing who they are, you can now sell to them.
Hi, welcome back. Oh, frick, I forgot to warn you guys. Perry, Norm, I always ask the same question as Isla reshuffles the breakout rooms, which is, please, y'all, tell us the future. What's something coming in the space or whatever that you're excited by, or a bold prediction if you have one. And now you are massively on the spot. You're welcome for that. Perry, you want to go first?
Well, right. So I knew the question was coming, and I was going to say I'm really excited for regulations to finally drop, and they did. So now I'm excited to see how companies react to that. So who's going to react first? What does that mean for them? And then what does next year look like? I think now that we have the regs, the big question is going to be what comes next? Who's going to really take the bull by the horns and develop something completely new that we haven't seen before and we all need to deal with?
And by that, you mean this is like an actual solution to deal with the regulations and actually provide this solution to the market?
Yeah. So are we going to see some of these big players like Fidelity actually roll something out on
Mm,
decentralized finance that allows more interaction from a more diverse set of participants?
makes sense. Norm, where's your predictions? What is
Yeah,
your prediction?
it's somewhat similar, Perry. So um, as I mentioned earlier, these rules that just came out apply to, let's just say, custodial arrangements, i.e., centralized exchanges. Going to Ray's question earlier, payment processors like a PayPal. They said, hey, we still have to come out with rules, potential rules for decentralized decentralized exchanges, non-custodial wallet providers, all that kind of stuff. So to me, what's really cool is I just see, even though some people may not like this from a privacy and tax standpoint, I just see now a lot more substance behind digital assets, a lot more potentially um, a, a lot more people becoming involved in digital asset space, TradFi implementations with respect to digital assets because of the fact that we're starting to get more rules in place. To me, this is a precursor to what may be coming down the road. Tax, accounting are being resolved. Hopefully, securities issues are being resolved in the next couple of years, etc.
But we did hear from Norman Perry, so this is their chance to plug whatever they want to plug. Perry, where do you want people to go to learn more about you and or Node 40?
Yeah, I can be found on LinkedIn. It's Perry Wooden, or you can go directly to our website, node40, node40.com. It's really easy to get in touch with us. We're happy to talk to you individually, hear what you're doing, and just discuss the industry at large. Love doing that.
Amazing. Norm, anything you want to add there? You are muted, by the way.
Same here. I put in my LinkedIn, same address as Perry in terms of node40.com, and I put in my LinkedIn link in the chat. Feel free to get a hold of me, get a hold of Perry. I'm happy to discuss. Pretty cool area.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for sharing your wisdom here today.